Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Burch from Cuba PD in New York. He has been there since 2004. He has a degree in police science and criminal justice, as well as a degree in criminal justice education. He is a member of the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, and his wife is a doctor. He has one son and two labs. So I'm really looking forward to having him on today's show. Welcome, Chief Burch. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to good conversation.
I am as well. So there were a few things that I actually intentionally left out of your bio because I wanted you to be the star to kind of talk about these things and some of the boards that you're currently on. But one of the things I really did appreciate is that you did infuse a little bit about your personal life, and you said that you're married, you have a son, you have two dogs. And I really appreciated that because I think, so often when we do our bios, we don't allow people to see the person behind our title or what we do. So I wanted to kind of shout that out a little bit because I thought that was really cool of you. But I was hoping that maybe you could give us a little bit more info, more than I gave on the intro of some of the boards that you sit on and some of the things that you've done throughout your career.
Sure. Yeah. Well, to start off, I didn't plan on getting into law enforcement. Kind of funny. I was going to be a teacher. That was kind of what I wanted to do. Went to school for that initially. I got roped into doing a ride along with the police department here, where I currently work. And the night that I did the ride along, we had a stolen vehicle. And when we were investigating that, of course, I say we. I was just a lowly ride along. I didn't know anything. I was green, and this vehicle took us on a chase. It ended up in another jurisdiction. Long story short, the suspect was caught. It was kind of an adrenaline rush. So I thought, well, this is what I want to do now. So, I quickly changed what I was going to school for and got into law enforcement. And little did I know, and probably other people that you've had on before or talked to will tell you the same thing. I thought that it was like 24/7 pure adrenaline rush. I realized very quickly that it wasn't. It was a lot more paperwork and a lot more downtime. But I wouldn't have changed a thing. And so here I am 21 years later, now in a police administration. But that's kind of the backstory of how I got into it. Some of the boards that I've sat on, one of the ones that's probably relevant was it's more of an organization, but Partners for Prevention in Allegheny County, and they're still very active now. I'm not as active with them as we were initially, but they were a great organization, and what we were able to do on that particular organization, and what they still do now, they initiated getting pill drop boxes for local pharmacies, hospitals. Every police precinct and police station in our county got them, and it's no questions asked. People can come in. There's a camera in our lobby, and they can drop off their unwanted or expired medications. It's sad. So a lot of times it's a family member that's passed away, and they just don't want it in their house. As we've all seen across the country, a lot of times people start with prescription pain pills and things of that nature, and it takes them down a kind of a windy road of drug abuse and addiction. Great people to get caught up in it, most of the time. And so this is a way for them to get it out of their house and away from, loved ones or young children or anybody that's coming over to the house that could potentially, take some of those pills. So that's probably the biggest one that's most relevant to some of the stuff we're talking about today.
Thank you for sharing. When you said that, there were a couple of things you said that I thought were interesting. One, you said I got roped in to this profession. And then you said you didn't realize that it was a lot of paperwork and you thought that it was going to be like, call after call, pure adrenaline, but you were going to be a teacher. So I feel like you were prepared for the paperwork part of it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Do you believe that everything happens in the way that it's meant to?
I do have times where I think that way, and I think all of us think that way sometimes, right? Because, 21 years later, here I sit now, and I find great enjoyment more now in trying to make like our process work here and make everything work for all the people that work with me and the community. So it's worked itself out, and I feel like I don't think it's like a deck of cards, right? If you take one out, the whole thing might fall and you might not be where you hope to be. So yeah, I do. I feel that way at times, definitely.
Yeah, I have a similar feeling. I tell my story all the time where people ask me, like, how did you, get into working with law enforcement and wellness? And I'm like, totally by accident,
Yeah,
so when you're like, I got roped in, I felt that deeply because I was like, yeah, like that's how I felt too. And I had no intention in working with law enforcement, and it was really just by chance that I made a connection with someone, and they worked
sure.
at the police academy locally and was like, will you help, my recruit class? And I was like, sure. And then, fast forward, and now here we are today on this podcast. And it is really interesting how maybe life takes you in different directions than maybe you originally anticipated. But then once you're
Yep,
there, you're like, wow, like one, I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I also feel like, at least speaking for myself, my past experience that I had in my life before, this profession that I do now prepared me for what I do now. And, I'm curious if you can give a little bit of your why. I know that wellness is something that's really important to you, and you've done a lot of great things, and you've sat on boards that really focus on wellness. And when did that become kind of a focus for you, maybe as an individual or as a leader, and why?
okay, so it's kind of a tragic story, but what really opened my eyes to it was right around the time that my son was born, which would have been a little over 6 years ago. We had a pretty severe case. It was a homicide by neglect of an infant, and and it was a six. We had a successful prosecution on it, but the damage is always done, no matter what. Even if somebody does get successfully prosecuted, you can't bring that infant back or that person that has been as deceased. But in this particular case, I was in the hospital with my wife, and she was giving birth to my son. And investigators from our office, or we had just gotten home, and they had asked to come up to my house to get a diaper, because obviously, this infant was neglected and left in a bed, and it was in the middle of a hot, lengthy weekend. It was warm weather, and so the infant was deceased and had soiled the diaper, and they needed to measure the weight of the an unused diaper and the one that the infant was wearing. You have to make sure you're crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's in any investigation. But those some of those investigators that work with me in our agency, and the assistant district attorney that had come to my house also, because they knew we had abundant supply of diapers right at that time. I realized they all have kids too, and I was in one of the best times of my life, right, having a child, uh, and they had kids that were young, and here they were investigating this case, and it got me thinking about the emotional toll that could take on them, and when I was back to work and watching them follow up, because it was a lengthy case. Obviously, any of those cases, they take a long time to investigate. But watching them, keep their nose to the grind and have a successful prosecution, and thinking to myself, well, who's looking out for them? And so, it was around that time that we got a local counselor that is always willing to speak with our staff, brought them on board. We have department chaplains. Not everybody's religious, but there are people that are, and sometimes that helps. So we brought in I started a department chaplain program at that time, and those things were really for the mental wellness and mental health of any staff members, and some of our staff members have talked to them before in times of crisis or times when they've seen something bad on the job, and it's been beneficial. So I think your initial question, how did I kind of realize it or get started with it, that was the biggest one that really opened my eyes, where I thought, it's something, I've never thought about it in this way, and our mental health is important too. So that was, tragic, but from tragedy sometimes, comes good things, and we learn from it. And that was a time when we did.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I do think that it almost has to happen sometimes. I'm not saying that particular event, but I'm saying I think that you don't know until you know.
Yep.
And when you know, then it's a responsibility to do,
Yep.
to take action. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And kind of the thing that popped up for me while you were talking about all of this, obviously, you recognized that the job can take a toll on everybody. And a lot of chiefs that I talk to, they talk about their team so much of like, I had to get resources for everybody else to support everybody else.
Sure.
how have you learned to take care of yourself as a leader?
Well, it solves itself here because we are a smaller agency, and that's one benefit that's really nice is we all communicate so well. Instead of being in an agency with like 5,000 employees, where you might not know everybody's name or everybody that's within your span of control, um, here we all know each other well, and it's kind of a tight knit little community for us, or a little work community, so really we're pretty good about seeing things through together, checking on each other. And obviously a lot of it also is just in the off time when I'm not working, have some good hobbies. I think everybody will say that, but have good hobbies and take advantage of that, and be friends sometimes. Try to reach out and be friends with people that are outside of the job too, because they always seem to give you another perspective on things, and I think that kind of can help too.
And I think that it's funny you said that because I almost think that sometimes it's by nature that you surround yourself with people who are so ingrained in what you do, because sometimes we don't want that outside perspective. But I
Right.
agree with you that I think it's so critical that you surround yourself with people who are going to look out for you and also keep you in check a little bit,
Yeah.
and who are going to be able to offer different ways of perspective, or different insights, or even just like grab you by the shoulders a little bit and shake you and
Yeah.
like tell you when you're messing up a little bit. And
Yeah.
I've definitely had that in my life where like I intentionally surrounded myself with people who were going to enable maybe some of my poor behavior because I
Sure.
didn't want someone on the outside calling me out for it. And so I do think it's really important that you hang on to the people who were with you, throughout other chapters of your life,
Sure.
because they know who you are beneath what you do.
Yep. Absolutely. And as a leader, in an organization, I think too. Have you ever heard of the term iatrogenic? It's a,
No.
it's
Okay,
a, it's a
teach me
term.
something.
Well, it's a term like that. It's a medical term for an illness or an injury that is caused by a doctor when they're doing like an exam or a procedure, but it's inadvertent, right? They don't do it on purpose. Well, I think that there should be a term like that for leadership too, because I feel like sometimes if we aren't willing to change and realize that what maybe we need some mental health help too, or wellness overall for our agency, then I think we're kind of being iatrogenic, really, because we're sort of letting it fester. We're not doing anything to change or get better with change with the times, and treat some of these issues like our mental health and officer wellness. So I think that term could also be used for leadership. It's a failure if we're not addressing those issues. So
And
I've
to
always
your
looked at it that
point,
way anyway.
yeah, I like that a lot. And to your point, you're saying inadvertently, maybe you're doing more harm or you're doing harm by
Right.
interesting.
It's the
I,
old saying, right? Well, leaders will say, well, like, especially in law enforcement, you just need to be tough. Well, we just suck it up. Back in the day, we didn't do it that way 20 years ago. We just sucked it up, or some people turned to alcohol or something else. But in today's day and age, we know what we know now, right? And we know that I always say, if you don't change with the times, you get left behind. And so I just kind of always have thought that term shouldn't just be medical. I think we're doing that disservice to our staff when we don't change and get them the help they need.
yeah, I like that a lot. Thank you for teaching me that. And I'm sure anyone who's listening, that is something new for them too. But I think it's really interesting to start looking at different industries when we talk about growth and leadership and how we do things. Everyone's going to have their one track mind of processes and how to be. And I had someone recommend, and I'm not going to be able to think of it now, but a podcast that was highlighting a lot of like the big companies that were really successful, but they were all really random. It was like the vacuum, like a vacuum company. And then it was, and it was talking about these founders. Maybe it was called founders. But anyway, they were talking about these founders and how they were to do things, different leadership skills. And I found that to be very valuable to understand other industries and how they do things. And there was another chief that was talking on the podcast about how they started to look at how pilots were doing things with their wellness, these high performing individuals and the things that they were doing in that industry, and seeing how you can apply it then to the law enforcement industry. And so I think it's interesting for you to look at the medical industry and be like, okay, well, what are the things they're doing maybe really well? What are some of the things that are happening as far as like, injuries? And then how does that relate to what we do, and how can we improve our processes moving forward? I think that's really interesting.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
You
definitely.
You use verbiage that I think is really interesting, and I want to call this out. So you said we check in on each other. You made it sound like very much like you were on the same level, like you guys are a team, you guys are all checking in on each other and having these conversations. But when you and I talked offline, you said a couple things that I wrote down that I wanted to kind of, call out. But you said, one, that you don't like to call them your people or people. And you don't like to say that they work for you. And so the way that you present these concepts or the way that you talk to your team is very intentional. Can you tell me a little bit and tell our listeners a little bit about why that's important for you to not say certain things that maybe are habit for a lot of us to say? I know I say people all the time. So can you give us a little bit of your philosophy on that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm quirky. I have a stack of leadership books. I've tried to, I don't know. There's always debate on whether people are born to do things or they learn it. I don't know what the right answer is there. But my thing is always servitude leadership. I've kind of like studied all the models, and I feel like servitude leadership. I'm kind of here, and staff is here. And I think it's important to give them the tools they need and the resources and advocate for them when necessary. And then get out of their way, so let them do their job. They're probably better at it than I am, especially because I haven't been doing it for a long time now. But then if there's an issue or something, because you're always going to have that, then maybe you need to come back up and be a little autocratic, be here for a little bit. And then once the issue is dealt with, I always like to go back to here, because most of the time there's staff members that can do a ton of different things better than I can. So who am I to be an expert on that when they're better at it than I am? So, and I don't like to call them my, people or my, staff. I just coworkers, I think, because I always kind of look at it like I like football. I look at it like an NFL team, right? So every player on the NFL team, what are their ultimate goal? They're trying to get to the Super Bowl. Well, why should we be, any different? Our ultimate goal is to help end a case or solve a case or do whatever tasks come in front of us for the day. But at the end of the day, we should all be working together to do that, to get to our Super Bowl, right? So I just looked at it more like a team. I think that's just kind of the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was kind of smiling because I talk about how I do view you guys. One, I do view you guys as professional athletes. For me, there's no question about that. Like professionally, you guys have to perform at an elite physical and mental level to be able to perform the functions of your career effectively and safely, right? But to your point of it being team mentality, you're dealing with people at the end of the day, right? And maybe not everyone is best friends. If you look at,
Sure.
Whatever football team, what do you got? Are you Giants or
We're the Buffalo Bills.
the Bills? Okay.
Yeah, die
um,
hard.
so you look at that team and maybe not everyone is best friends, right? But to your point, you want everyone to be performing at their highest level because when the team succeeds, everyone succeeds, right?
Yep.
And you're only
Yep.
as strong as your weakest player. And so you don't want anyone to be injured. You don't want anyone to be on their C game. You want everyone to be on their A game. And so what do you have to do as a team to be able to move everybody forward? And for you guys, it's not just about winning a game. Like your stakes are much higher. And so, for you guys, it could be life or death out on the field, right? So you want to
Yep.
make sure that you guys have all the resources to succeed. So I agree with you. I draw a lot of parallels to that. And I think that the mentality, if everyone thought this way, because I see a lot of peer-to-peer pressure and judgment and stigma.
Mhm.
And I think if the conversation was more about, hey, we are a team, and regardless if you guys are best friends or not, you should want everyone to be okay,
Yep.
and so how do we approach, each other in a way that encourages that rather than like judging each other or, whatever we start to
Sure.
see in that kind of peer-to-peer environment. So I am curious, you said kind of, is it nature or nurture when it comes to leadership? What do you think?
Is it nature or nurture?
Yeah. Are
Uh,
you in, are
Am I
you,
allowed to say a little bit of both?
yeah, you are
I
100%.
think I think it depends on. I think each instance or each scenario could be dynamic,
Hmm.
and it probably could depend on the scenario.
Yeah.
Um, there's times to do both, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I actually agree with you. It's really interesting to ask the question like, are leaders born or are they developed? And I do agree with you. I think it's a little bit of both. I think
Yep.
that there are some people who are born with leadership skills, and everyone
Mhm.
knows those people, where like they've just always been that way. And then
Yep.
there's other people who have had to work a little bit harder to develop those skills, but can still be effective leaders through training and education. So
Yep.
I agree
Yep.
with you. It's a little bit of
Ab-
both.
Absolutely.
I know you said that you guys are a little bit of a small agency. And so, what are the dynamics that you are finding within a smaller organization that are maybe strengths and some things that are some challenges?
Um, well, I'll tell you definitely for sure. One of the challenges is when you're in a smaller community, more people know you. So, sometimes you're running into people in a grocery store that you might have dealt with or that but that kind of strengthens, I think, how you deal with people because it keeps more of a human element to it, right? You see them in the community from time to time. And so, I think it makes you have more of appreciation for how you treat them when you're responding to calls or when you're out in the streets, handling a festival or something like that that comes up. So I think it can have a good, even though it's a smaller community, it can have a good impact on how you deal with people.
Yeah. I think that what you just said is maybe a really good reminder for everybody. Like, I would think that even if you are part of a large organization, that you would want to treat people as if you're going to see them in the grocery store tomorrow,
Sure.
as if they are your neighbor, and
Or a family member.
or a
We always
family
say,
member.
treat them
Yeah.
like you'd want your mother to be treated, or your grandmother, or your father, whoever, your son.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think too, like, and maybe this is so selfish of me to say, because I know that no matter how good your intentions are, no matter how hard you try, not everyone is going to love you or like you.
Right.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
we all want that to happen. And I struggled with that for a really long time because I attached my self-worth so much to the opinions of others. And so
Yeah.
I was always trying so hard to like, conform in a way that I thought would, make sure that I kept the peace, and
Yeah.
everyone loved me or liked me. And I realized as I got older that no matter how hard I try, that might not always be the case. And you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe selfishly, I really hope that, when people talk about me, that they can talk highly of me when I'm not in the
Sure.
room. I
Sure.
hope that the experiences that people have with me are positive ones and that, there aren't any negative things that they can say about my character and the way that I treated them. And so I would hope that everyone would want to operate in that
Yeah.
same way, so that when people do, talk about you or, about the experience that they had with you, that it's at least as positive as you possibly can.
Absolutely. We have a little informational screen that's always flashing different updates in the community, things for when officers come in and they need to check the daily incidents and what's going on in the community. And I have one up there that I put up there, and it's I didn't come up with it. I've seen it several times, but it holds so much value and so much weight to me. And it's always a constant reminder for them. But it says that the name on your name tag and the name on the patch, we represent both our patch on our shoulders and our name tag on our uniforms. So the one on our name tag is our family name, and the one on our uniform is our community, right? But we
Mhm.
need to remember to we're representing both when we go out in the community, right? So we really need to be cognizant of that. And I think that goes along with what we're talking about with just how we treat people in general, and that kind of ties in with leadership because we are leaders out in the community. Even a police officer that's not in supervision, when they step out into the community, they're a leader, right? Somebody is looking to them to help get their cat out of the tree, but the next time they might be looking to them because they're standing at the roadside with a mother and father whose relative was just killed in a car accident, and they're looking for someone for guidance. So we need to represent both of those names well.
Yeah, and I think that those interactions, I mean, it's an incredibly huge responsibility for you guys to carry. So I just want to at least say that I recognize that that's a
Thank you.
huge responsibility, and most people will never carry that weight of that responsibility. But the interactions that you're having within the community could also set the trajectory for the rest of their life,
Yep.
in a positive or negative way,
Yep.
set the trajectory for the rest of your life. You were in
Sure.
a ride along and you had a positive experience and you're like, this is it. And now here
Yeah.
you are, chief of police, and I think the opposite can hold true. If the interaction is that of a negative one, that could set a trajectory too. And so I know that that's a
Sure.
lot of weight and pressure, but I think it just goes back to the importance of trying your best,
Sure.
to have those interactions that are positive, which is easier said than done because I can only imagine the things and the patience that you have to have for some of the things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we don't always get it right. We see it in the media a lot. There's there's some bad officers sometimes, but most of us try to get it right and try to do the right thing. And we don't want to work with people that are not in that same camp. So,
100%.
but it is hard.
How do you create that culture? I know, you said it's maybe a little bit easier, I would imagine, because you are a smaller organization. You can have those conversations with people. You can look out for each other. I also know that when you and I talked offline a little bit, you said things also happen closer to home, good
Sure.
and bad. But how do you create that culture where everyone holds each other to a standard that is positive? And if, you're seeing some of those behavioral signs that maybe are worth flagging, that you're able to have those conversations.
The main thing is training, training and supervision. I would say that's where sometimes I talk about being a servitude leader, but then having to step up and be a little more autocratic. Just making sure that we address it when it happens and not falling into that iatronic, like I talked about earlier, not falling into a mentality where we're not addressing it, so we're inadvertently causing issues in the agency. And then the rest of it pretty much sorts itself out because most of your staff and most people that you come across every day are good people, and it's the same thing here. Most of our officers are great people, and they want to do well, and they don't want to be with someone who's treating someone bad. And then body cameras, equipment, stuff like that also helps. Um, it helps two ways because it helps weed out someone if they're bad, but it also helps strengthen the good officers because now they feel like they've got the equipment and the backing they need to show that they're doing a good job when someone's trying to say they're not. So
Mm.
I would go technology, supervision, and then just being human. I try to have like my staff up to I have a cottage on a lake, and we have them up every summer. Just a cookout, informal. Bring your kids, bring your family. We're a small enough agency we can do things like that, and take them tubing, take them out on the boat, and connect with them and get to know them and their family. And that's what makes a smaller police department a little more intimate and makes it a little easier to connect and make sure that people are on the up and up. So
Yeah.
that's one of the perks, I guess, or benefits.
I I did this training and I thought it kind of aligns with what we're talking about. And they said you're gonna have someone who is like making the rules, but then you also have to have someone or multiple people who are accountability people,
Yeah.
right? And without accountability, it falls apart, right? And so they were doing this, they were talking about the importance of this. Like, yes, there's rules, there's people at the top, but then there's people holding each other and accountable for things. And what you were saying about the body cams, I thought was really interesting because what popped into my head when you said that is, man, like how I kind of think it'd be really cool. I think it would actually help me to grow a lot. Like, how cool, I'm going to put this in a personal perspective. How cool would it be if we could go back through like arguments that we had with our spouse and have like a moment of like, oh my gosh, is that really how I said that? Or like, was that my tone? Or,
Right.
I don't remember saying it that way because I think, again, like we all have our own perspectives and we remember things in different ways, especially when things are escalated. And so I think that would be so interesting to create more of that understanding, self assessment, and accountability within
Sure.
oneself to be able to see, like, oh, like I have room for improvement here.
Yep.
And then the flip of it, to your point, like if you did it like perfect. I'm going to put in quotes because I don't think perfection actually really exists, but I'll
Right.
say if we
I
did it
agree.
really well, I can be like, wow, like I crushed that. Like that's
Yeah.
really cool. And it helps build your confidence. So I think that's really interesting to be able to have that perspective of
Yep.
how you approached a situation, how you handled it. But then having some self accountability for, our actions and things that we do, but then also holding each other accountable for things as well. And I know that kind of goes back to that team mentality
Yeah.
that we were talking about earlier.
Yep. Yep. And we use the cameras for that. We use them for training and, to highlight good things that are done. And sometimes we even turn them into um, good public relate. We use videos and we'll make videos for public relations right through the lens of our body camera. And that's kind of worked well for us too.
Yeah, I think it's important. I've actually had a lot of people put this in perspective for me because I'm incredibly hard on myself. And I've always been the person that's like, how do I keep improving? What are the things I did wrong? How can I, and so it's always like, let's, revisit the tape, and like,
Sure.
let's figure out growth opportunities. But I've had a lot of people through this podcast remind me that it's also important to celebrate the wins. It's
Yep.
also nice for people to tell you that you did a good job sometimes. So I
Yep.
like that you use it for both for training opportunities, but also to like tell people they're doing a good job because
Absolutely.
it's a hard job and I think anyone can relate to this. Like if you were in a relationship, and I do view like what you guys do is having a sort of a relationship with each other. Obviously, it's not a
Yep.
romantic relationship, but it's, a professional relationship. But if you were in a romantic relationship with someone who just always called out the bad things, the faults, the growth
Yeah.
opportunities, and never ever said good job or thank you, it might not be a very long lasting relationship.
Yeah.
You're like, man, I'm just
Put you in
getting
like a negative
beat
vacuum.
down
Yeah.
here. So I think it is important to recognize good work and to, have those moments to celebrate the wins and to say thank you and good job.
Yep. I agree with you. Definitely.
Do you find that through having these conversations, through building that community, that you've been able to retain staff more and be an agency where people want to come to work? Do you think that that has been impacting your recruitment and your retention efforts as well?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely do. I think not. Um, I go back to the iatrogenic example I gave. Not having those, not as a leader, not being or not being willing to help your staff and be there for them, and not just being feared. Like you're. So many people get into supervision, and I think they think that they have to have all the answers, and if they don't, they think it's going to make them look weak. So then they kind of shy away, or they won't change with the times because it's not their idea or it's someone else's idea. It makes them look weak. And I think having that mentality and giving the staff that works here the tools, like I've said before, the tools they need, and being approachable, and not being, if somebody comes in and says we're doing it this way, but I think there's a better way to do it, and it was my idea initially and now it's theirs, I just listen. And if it is, hey, let's change. And and I tell everybody it was this person's idea, and I don't take credit for it, because ultimately I will get the credit, and they will all get the credit. The agency gets the credit, and our professional get the credit, right? And then in turn, I think, and you'd have to poll people, but I believe that it makes people want to work here or stay here, and so that, that's a that could be debated, I guess, but that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I had a mentor really early on tell me it's better to tell someone that you don't know than to BS your way through it.
Yeah, and I'll get
And
you an answer. I always say I don't know, but we'll get you an answer, and
yeah,
then follow up on it, right?
yep. I actually had a chief put this in perspective. I thought it was really interesting. He challenged the way that we were just saying it because they said that they're like, say, I don't know, but I'll find out, or like, give me a little bit of time and I'll find out. And I had a chief say, I like to say, I don't know, but let's find out together.
Oh, that's
And
even
I
better.
and I
Yeah.
was like, wow, I really like that because it's like, hey, like I'm gonna pull you into my world. Like
Sure.
let's find the solution together or the answer
Yep.
together. So I thought that wasn't me. That was someone else that challenged my thought process. So I thought that was interesting. But um, I think that you're right. I think it's a hit to the ego. We want to feel like we have all the answers and give this perception of perfection and maybe you do feel like you've I'm going to put this in quotes again, that you've failed if you don't know the answer to something. But personally, I would much rather someone say, hey, I honestly don't know, but I'm willing to find
Yep.
out for you or with you, than
Yep.
for someone to BS their way, because everyone can sniff out the BS, right? And
Oh, you can see right through it. Yep.
it's so unauthentic, and it just, I think you lose credibility so fast. The credibility that you do have is valuable, and all the knowledge you do
Yep.
have is valuable, and you lose that in a heartbeat if you're just like BSing your way through
Yep.
it. So,
Yep.
yeah. One of the things that you guys do I thought was really interesting and worthwhile to mention is that you guys participate, or your SROs participate in a podcast.
Sure.
And it's a way for you guys to really connect with the community. And I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of our officers, his name's Officer Capoletti. He's actually a full-time teacher. He's one of our part-time employees, and he teaches at the school. And we have two full-time school resource officers in two different school buildings. And there's students up there, and they put together a podcast through the technology department, and it's part of their, part of one of their electives at the school. And so we've had staff go on there, and it doesn't have to be just the school resource officers. Sometimes I've been on there before. It's been other officers that work here, and they just they do a few things to talk about the job they do, and it kind of gets them connected with the students, lets them see them in a different light than just at the side of the road stopping a car or responding to a bad call at someone's house. But also it gets them, they ask some goofy questions too. What kind of ice cream do you like? Favorite coffee shop? If you were walking into a gymnasium, one of the ones they love to ask is, you're walking into a gymnasium full of people, what's your walkout song? And they kind of play the song at the end with them. But I think the kids and the youth eat it up. And that's really what's important, because so many things on social media and Facebook and Instagram and all those things. I always say it's like a hammer, right? You can use it as a tool, or you can use it to build stuff and make stuff great, but you can also use it real quickly to destroy stuff.
Mm.
And so this is just another way that we can connect. And we didn't come up with this. That's something that the school, they came up with. So kudos to them. But we love jumping in on some of those things. And it's just a short 15-20 minute little podcast. And the students are the co-host with one of the officers. And it's fun. And they're not just doing it with police officers, it's community members, it's other teachers, it's business owners. But we jump on there anytime we can. And it really helps to get us engaged with the kids.
That is so fun. Okay, so what is your walkout song?
What is my walkout? Well, when I was on there, I jokingly it had to be Bad Boys, right?
Okay, yeah.
The song. But if I were going to pick one, it'd probably be something by George Strait.
Okay.
Probably be like somewhere down in Texas, because I think that's where I'm going to end up.
Okay.
Right off into the sunset.
That is too funny. That is so cute. I love that that's something that they're doing, because we know that media is something that's powerful, especially for like businesses. So for them to learn how to do those things and learn communication skills, which I think is actually really important. It's something that's
Yeah.
lost with technology, but then for them to also connect with you and you to connect with them, I think is so cool. And we talked a little bit about this offline. My brain immediately went to, what is the long term impact and ROI that that's going to have, and if we zoom out and look long term, to your point, these kids are having positive interactions with you guys, and maybe that sets a trajectory for their life and they want to be in this profession long term, or maybe they see a good role model that maybe they don't have at home, and that
Yep.
sets the trajectory for their life in a more positive way. And so I would be really interested to see in the next 10, 20 years if any of them end up being an officer one day. I
Yeah,
think that would be really
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah. And we've had a couple. We currently have one right now we have two actually that went to school here, and now they've
Really?
come back and joined our department. Yeah. So
Wow.
but that was that they've been here a little while. So, but still, I think that seeing the officers and seeing them as human and getting to know them, I certainly think it helps. I don't see any way it can have a negative impact.
Yeah, 100%. Well, to that point, what words of wisdom would you share for the younger generation who are coming into the career today? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you that you want to pass on to them.
So, I always ask a question when we're interviewing police officers, and it comes from a quote from General Norman Schwarzkopf, but I always say when I'm asking them different questions in a job interview, I say, hey, you're standing at your locker, you're done with field training, you're grabbing your gun belt, you're grabbing your vest, you're putting your tool belt on, and you've got your firearm and your pepper spray and your taser, your handcuffs. But you realize there's a lot of stuff on that belt. So you look down, you realize you got room for one more thing. When you look in your locker and you have two things in your locker left that you can put on that and take out with you every day. And that's strategy and character. So you got to pick one. You only have room for one. And obviously the answer hopefully is character. But then I always explain to them, you're a leader. When you go out on that road, whether you don't have to be a supervisor, you don't have to be a mayor or a judge or, the president of the United States. You're a police officer and you have a huge amount of authority and people look up to you in your community. So you really need, no matter what you do, when you leave for that shift or you get into this line of work, always pack your character with you.
I love that.
You can probably make do without the other stuff, but always have your character. Wow. And good character.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here. You taught me a few new things today, so I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course.